Okay, so carrying on with part 2 of limiting in Primo. So other limiters that are generally useful to students. So you have these availability limiters. And if you know you are not able to come to the library, as most of you are not at this moment, and you only need things we have electronic access, it's often very common to limit to that available online. However, in terms of finding articles, that limiter is a little bit superfluous. What I mean by that is 99.999% of our journal subscriptions are electronic. We get very few paper journals, so the majority of things you're going to be bringing up are automatically electronic and wholly available online. So you can add that limiter. It's not going to change your search results much. Other things that would change your search results is adding in this peer-reviewed journals. So remember, a few weeks ago, we talked about what is peer-reviewed. It means that before the article was published, that article was reviewed by a group of anonymous experts who then looked for where did the person get their info, how do they set up their study, is their research unique and should be published, etc. So if your professor is requiring you to find peer-reviewed only research, which I am for the final project, 2 out of your 3 articles have to be peer-reviewed, so remember that. You can limit to peer-reviewed, and that is going to drastically change your search results sometimes. So that knocked that 65,000 down to 63. Definitely a good limiter. So this way you don't have to do any thinking, is this a peer-reviewed journal? Is this article coming out of a peer-reviewed journal? It's automatically doing that for you. So it's weeding out the things that would not be appropriate for your research paper if you're being required to use peer-reviewed. However, do keep in mind, peer-reviewed journals only applies to journal articles. You will not get book chapters, you will not get books, you will not get videos, you will not get conference proceedings or reviews or things like that within this. So if you are looking for things like newspapers or book chapters or something like that, and you're wanting to include those in your research, I wouldn't add this peer-reviewed limiter always. However, most of the time you're going to do multiple searches, that you're not just going to type in one set of keywords and one limiter and find everything you need. You need to play around with your keywords, you need to play around with your limiters, get the best information coming up to the top of the pile each time. So add it with peer-reviewed limiters, get that really great peer-reviewed research, and then take off that limiter and see what you get and get the good information there. So with this, you can also see each peer-reviewed journal article has this little purple book and eye icon and peer-reviewed underneath it. So even if you didn't add that limiter, that's still going to be there. Another really important thing, so that kind of sums up availability, but another very important thing for people to limit to is publication date. So many times your professors have date requirements for their resources that you're using in your paper. I don't have a specific date requirement for my final project that I've assigned you, but I do want you to take into consideration date and currency when you're talking about your evaluation. So keep that in mind. So with calcium and osteoporosis, if you're researching this on a subject title, we'd probably want the most current research. We want the most up-to-date findings, most accurate info in 2020. So I really wouldn't want research going back to 1940. So you can change this. I would say let's go broad and say the last 10 years. Most subject areas consider 3 to 5 years to be current and up-to-date. 10 at most if you're expanding that. So keep that rule of thumb in mind for currency. And this publication date is one that you do have to click refine to get it to resort. So you see that knocked that 6,000 down to 3,000. So anything coming up now in your results is going to be published within the last year. So it's just a way to weed out out-of-date things. So instead of having to go through and look at each article, okay, that's not relevant because it's 20 years old, it does it for you. And so it brings that source type down to the most recent 10 years. Finally, you have these other things like subject, author, journal type, collection. Most students don't use those a lot. Do remember we did collection a little bit when we were looking at different book collections. The one students occasionally use is language. If everything in your search results is coming up in Turkish and you don't read Turkish, you can sit here and weed through to find the English ones yourself, or you could add English as a limiter, and it will bring up only articles published in English. So most of the time that's not something students commonly add, but occasionally it does come out there that the most relevant things are coming up in foreign languages. And so if that's happening, you can limit to English. All right, one more video coming up on accessing these and some tips and tools about item records, and we will be done.